Cool. So Venkata says, can Jenkins only be used to push code only to production, not into UAT? No. So Venkata's question is, can Jenkins be used to push code in production, but not into UAT? No, Venkata. I mean, you can run the same jobs in the UAT as well, right? Who's stopping you from running the same job in the UAT? Jenkins doesn't care about the environment, right? It will do everything you'll ask it to do. So Jenkins itself has no idea it's a production environment. It's just that you know it's a production environment. Yes, Rakesh, you're correct. Now, Sripat says best example could be in dev environments would be continuous deployment, and in prod it might be continuous delivery. Yeah, Sripat. So that's a good example as well. Cool. All right. So now that we are clear, we'll actually start. How much time do we have? We've got 10 minutes. So we'll actually start with this application that we have. So this is the address book application that we're going to work with, and we're going to be designing or we're going to be creating a CI/CD pipeline around this application. Now again, this I cannot stress this enough. The creating the pipeline itself is very, very, very easy. The difficult process is to understand what all do you need within the pipeline. That's when you really have to spend time understanding the application. So if you're actually working in a company right now, right, which has a DevOps team in place, just pay attention to what those guys do. If your development team is actually releasing a new update, you'll see those DevOps guys spending almost 2 weeks or 3 weeks very close to the development team just to understand what the application is doing and how the application works. So they are not really worried about the code itself. They are worried about what all needs to be automated in the first place. That's what you will really be spending your time with. So in this case, my objectives are clear. I would want to compile the application first, then I would want to test the code, then I would want to review the code, then I would want to package the code, then I would want to deploy the code. So at this point in time, we would only be doing the CI part, and the deployment part we'll be doing using Docker. So we won't really deploy it right now. We will only look at the CI part, then we'll move on to Docker, and then we'll come back to the deployment part, because deployment is done with Docker. Like you can deploy a Java application directly, but we might as well just wrap it into a Docker, because Docker is one of the most important tools out there. So this is what we will be designing right now, and then we'll move on to Docker. And once we know Docker, we'll package the application and we'll come back to actually deploy the application as pipeline. Now, before we start creating the jobs and before we start creating the pipelines, because this is a Java code, this is going to be built, compiled, tested, reviewed using something called as Maven. So for those of us who have no idea what Maven is, now Maven is a third-party tool. Maven is used to compile any Java code that you have. It'll work with any Java application. It's not just limited to the address book that I have. It will work with any Java application you have. It will work with, so basically it can compile an application, it can test a Java code, it can review a Java code, it can package a Java code. So as long as you're working with a Java application, Maven is your go-to tool. So this is limited to Java. In the same example, if you're working with a Python application, Maven is not really required there. So in case of Python, you might end up using some other way to test the code, but that is for you to decide after you end up discussing things with the development team. Now, because we have a Java code, we're going to be using Maven. Now, before we actually start creating the pipelines and the jobs, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that Maven is actually installed in my Jenkins. So I can go to global tool configuration. In this, I should have an option to install Maven. So it says Maven installation. So I'll click on add Maven, and it's asking me for a name. So this is an arbitrary name. This is an English name. This has nothing to do with Maven, but this is for you to, when you actually create a job, it will ask you which Maven to use. So it'll give you this name in the option. So this is for you to remember what is your Maven called. So in this case, I'll just name it my Maven, and it says install from Apache. I think we're all good there. So I'll click on apply, and I'll click on save. That will install Maven for me within Jenkins. Now, revisiting the question of Renee, or I think somebody else asked me, about Java. Like we have Java installed here, then why do we need Java to be installed within Jenkins? Now there are two ways to it. Now I could also, now when you actually start working with Maven, right? You don't really say Maven. It will say Maven not found. It's actually called MVN. When you start working with Maven, the command is MVN. So now if I type MVN, it says Maven is not installed. If you want to install Maven, please run the command apt install Maven. Now please understand the difference. I have Maven installed within Jenkins. My Jenkins will work with Maven because it has Maven installed within Jenkins environment, but that's not installed on the operating system. That's just within Jenkins. So there are two ways I can work with the softwares or any kind of environments. I can either install Maven here. I can also say apt install Maven. Why? Which will install Maven, and I can make Jenkins use the Maven that is installed on my operating system, which is what I'm doing right now, or I can install Maven within Jenkins and make it use that particular Maven. So there is always two ways to install something in Jenkins. You can either install it directly on the operating system and make Jenkins use it, or you can go to the global tool page and install something within Jenkins and then make Jenkins use that particular part. So I hope I'm clear about the two different things. Now, before as I've said multiple times, it's important that you know how things work manually before you actually start automating things. So following up on the same principle, this is my Java application, right? So we'll just see what it looks like to compile a Java application manually. So I'll copy this code to my server. I'll create a directory called temp application. I'll go to that directory. Oops, temp application. Now, can anybody tell me how would I copy this code to my server? This is about Git. We talked about Git yesterday. How would I copy this code to my like this directory? Right. So Sandeep is correct. Like all of us are correct. So I can simply go git clone this URL. So it will basically clone the entire directory for me. Now a couple of guys said git pull. Guys, please don't be confused. The first time you're copying something, it would always be git clone. For the subsequent runs, it would always be git pull. So the very first time it would always be git clone and not pull, right? And now that I have this code here, I'll go into that directory. Cool. So this is the code that I have. Now, if I wanted to compile this application manually, the only command I would need to run is called mvn compile. Now I'm using mvn compile because this is a Java code and because my developers told me this is how they compile their application. So if you've never worked with Java, this is what you would ask your developers. How do you compile it right now? How do you package it right now? How do you test the code right now? You do it manually. Once you understand how it is done manually is when you start automating it. So just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to run Maven compile manually so that when we do it in Jenkins, you know what exactly is happening. So Rakesh says it's confusing. Are you saying we need to install either in Jenkins or directly on operating system? Rakesh, either of it works. So if you're still confused, right, just hold on to it for a while. Once we actually start creating the jobs, it'll make sense to you. Cool. So for now, I'm only running Maven compile. Now, what it's doing is it's looking at this file called pom.xml. Now, I'm not really going to get into pom.xml, but to give you a basic context, there's something called as, oh, sorry, I don't know what I pressed there. There's something called as requirements.txt when it comes to Python. There's something called as pom.xml when it comes to Java. So pom.xml is where the dependencies or the requirements of the libraries and binaries are defined of a Java application. So this is a file that is created by the developers, not by you. But this is a file where they say what all dependencies are required to be met in order for this application to work. Now that's why when I say Maven compile, Maven understands what all it needs to install or what all it needs to configure before it can actually compile the application, because it's looking at my pom.xml and it understands that, okay, these are the things that I need to install, and then I will be able to compile the application. So in case of Java, it's called pom.xml. And if I had a Python application, it would have been called requirements.txt. So in case of Python, they have requirements.txt where you list the dependencies of the application that you require. I might as well just, even if I Google, try github.com pom.xml, it would basically show me some pom.xml in GitHub. So it's a file called example pom.xml. So you can look at this file. But again, this is not something you would be creating. This would be created by the developers. You are only supposed to create the pipeline around it. That's your only job. Now, if I was to show you requirements.txt, how do you spell it? I'm sorry, requirements.txt. Now this is what a Python requirements.txt looks like. Like it's pretty simple in case of Python. It's just the name of the module that you require and the version of the module. Now in case of pom.xml, it's a bit complicated. For again, this is for the development team to create, not for you. So this is what a requirements.txt looks like, and that's what a pom.xml looks like. So if I go back to my server, it's still compiling it. So we'll give it a moment. Now it's taking its time because it's actually downloading dependencies from Maven's repo, like Maven's centralized repo. It's actually downloading plugins and dependencies that are required to actually compile the code. Once it is done for the first time, it won't really take as long if I was to run it for the second time. So it says build success. It took 3 minutes and 4 seconds, and the memory that was consumed was 20 megabytes and 56 megabytes. And this is the timestamp when it was finished. Now, I've only run this manually to show you how this is done manually before we actually create the jobs in Jenkins. So that, if you never worked with Java, it should not be the case where you had no idea why I created a job. This is how they would do it manually, is when they would come to you that Nishant, I'm running Maven compile, I'm running Maven test, I'm running Maven package manually. Can you please create a pipeline to deploy this application? That's where the pipelines would come into the picture. I hope we are all clear. Since we are running out of time, we would start with actual pipeline tomorrow. But I hope I was clear about what I have, what I have discussed so far. Venkata says, please share the link of the address book GitHub page. One moment. Okay, I'll share it with all of us. All right, let me put it to all of us. I hope you're getting the all chat messages that I'm sending, right? But if you're not, then this is the URL. Okay, now Sandeep says, is there any plugin in Jenkins to check the coding standard like there is W3C standard for testing HTML website coding standard? Sandeep, I'm pretty sure there would be. There's something called as lint, L-I-N-T. Now there's a lint plugin available for almost everything. So in case of Python, you'll have Python lint. In case of Java, you'll have Java lint. In case of XML, you'll have XML lint. So you can search for it yourself. Nadeem says, in case we install Maven on the system, which location will it be installed on? So hold on to that question for tomorrow, Nadeem. We'll look at like how you can work with Maven that is installed on the operating system or the Maven that is installed within Jenkins tomorrow once we actually create the job. Can you please suggest Bash book, if any? Oh, it's been years since I have used a book on Bash really. And I can find out one if you want, but I don't really remember one at the back of my head because I used to do Bash like back in the day. I can still write the Bash scripts very easily, but I don't remember the name of the books. So I'll find out the one that's the best for someone starting off, and I'll give you the name tomorrow. Andrea says, "Can I get your number, please?" Yeah, this is my number. Please don't call me in the middle of the night saying there is an error. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you have, but please respect the time. So my number is 928890. That's my number. Nadeem says, for best practice, do we need to maintain multiple Jenkins instances like Jenkins Dev? No, Nadeem. Jenkins one instance would always work with all the environments that you have. So again, you're getting ahead of yourself. We'll see how you can control multiple environment with Jenkins. There is something called as Jenkins master slave configuration. So that's for the later part of the Jenkins. So hold on to that for a while. Cool. So I think that was it for now. Tomorrow we'll actually start creating the pipeline. Now that we have the basics in place and now that we understand what we need to do, we'll start with the pipeline directly tomorrow, and then we'll move on to something called as master slave in Jenkins. and then we'll move on to what it looks like to have infrastructure as code in Jenkins. Nadeem says, how can we test plugin, and in case it crashes, how can we revert it? So Nadeem, whenever you install a plugin, you would obviously get an option within the job, and you can look at the logs to see what crashed. And you can basically uninstall it from Jenkins. You were gonna help with my server, I think, Renee. Okay, yeah, sure, Renee. I really forgot what your problem was. Yeah. So I think for now, I'm gonna help Renee fix her problem. Now, again, this is not something that I do. This is not my responsibility, but I'm really happy to fix any problems because in case it's something that I've never seen before, I'll get to learn something new myself. That's the, only motivation for helping you solve your problems. So for the people that are done for the day, people that are getting late, I wish you all a good night, a good day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. For the people that want to wait back and see what's Renee's problem and how do we fix it, you can stay back and we'll go over it and we'll see what's happening with her server. Renee, do you happen to have a mic? I can actually unmute you, so it's easier for you to talk rather than type your questions. Ramesh says, what is the right time to call? That's a very difficult question, Ramesh. I mean, I usually work during the day and the night. Like I work with clients from the States and and London. So I've been in London and US for a while, so I still work with those people. Basically, call me anytime, but just don't call me during the afternoon Indian Standard Time. Don't call me between 1 to 4 afternoon Indian Standard Time. Any other time would be fine. Somebody has said, where can we find the latest QA interview? I won't really be the right person to answer that question. Like, I've never worked as a QA and I never interview QA. I mostly interview the people for ops team and DevOps team. So I'm not really the right person for that. Renee, I'll unmute you right now and we'll see if you can actually talk and we can hear you. Give me one moment. I'm trying to find your name. Yeah, Renee, you can speak up and we can see if we can hear
Hello?
you. Yeah, we can hear you,
Hello?
Renee. Yes. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Renee.
Okay.
So what seems to be the problem with your server?
Oh, yeah, when I launched my instance, it said that error message that I showed you, and then I went and I was able up until this point to log into it. So I don't know what happened today because I was going to try to install, do the things that you were doing in class. So I'll be able to do them myself on my instance and follow along. And it would not let me, it said that there was no sufficient uh, resources or I needed to go to a different zone.
Oh,
But
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think I know what the problem is. So how it works is, I hope you can still see my screen. So in Google Cloud, there is a zone for everything. Now, if you are using credits, obviously you would not get the preference over the clients that are actually paying Google Cloud. So in your case, if it says the resource is not available, that would basically mean Google Cloud or Google in general is not assigning you the privileges to use that particular zone. So you would either have to use a different zone or you would have to email Google support requesting them to allow your servers to be created into that zone. So those are the two options that you have.
okay, yeah, because I just now tried it and it worked for the first time. So now I can start my survey. It's running right now after I started talking with you. But
Right.
give me an option to change because I only have one zone. So can I change zone or it would populate? Because when I click on zone, there was a up arrow and down arrow. There was only one
Mhm.
option.
Yeah, you can't really change the zone of the server
Okay,
that's already created. You will need to create a new server in the new zone. So you can't really
okay,
change the zone of a server.
okay. Well, I copied and pasted the error message to you, you probably didn't quite get it because it did say the same thing I'm telling you here, that there was not enough resources. And then,
Right. So if you ever get that error, it basically means that there are more people using Google Cloud in that location and they're actually paying Google. So obviously Google is going to prefer them over us, over the people that are using the credits. So you would
okay,
either have to email them that please allow my server, and they will kind of reserve the resources for you, or you would need to use another zone.
okay. If I may ask you quickly, what I was asking you earlier was, we use plugins in Jenkins. Now, when we use a Java plugin, is that the same thing as the JDK, or that's not the same thing? That's what I was asking.
Right. So I would hold on to that question until tomorrow, because tomorrow is when we're gonna see how you can work with the software that's on the operating system, and how we can work with the software that's on Jenkins. So hold on to that until tomorrow, and we'll get that answered.
Okay. Now, do you understand the question? The question though.
Yes, I do.
Okay. All
Cool.
right.
So all right. So I'll mute you again. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, a couple of more things. Can you unmute me as well once you're done, Andreas? Okay, so Andreas is the last person that I'm going to unmute for now. I really hope this does not become a practice. This is not something that I'm allowed to do, really, but I'm just doing it for the sake of saving the time. Andreas, you're unmuted. You can speak up.
Hi, Nishan. How you doing?
All good, man. Tell me.
Yeah, it's like the lecture is really good, but it looks like you focusing on some particular people, because I send you messages so many times when you were explaining the pool SCM. I
Yeah,
asked you like what is the difference between the pool SCM and then webhook, and I didn't
right,
get any reply. And before then, I sent you a message. I was asking on when you were explaining the global configuration issue. I was
right.
asking you whether is it the same like securing Jenkins, and that question came earlier. It was like I sent the question even before many other questions were asked, but I realized that you were focusing on some particular areas. So I don't know whether I was sending the message to a wrong inbox, or was I really sending it to you? That's what I just wanted to ask.
Right. So I'm really sorry if you feel that way, Andreas. I always try to answer as many questions as I can.
Yeah,
But
because
the problem is I receive like 10 questions every second. So I can't really, it scrolls up too fast and I can't pay attention to the questions when I'm explaining. So I apologize if I miss the question. I try to answer as many as I can, but
yeah,
it's not like I'm not intentionally answering your
yeah,
question. That's not the case.
I sent about 3 questions, but I never got one reply back. Because when you were
Right.
explaining the pool LCM stuff, then I've heard
Hmm.
of webhook. I say they do like when you do like a change, and then with webhook, I know this is where you do like instant change, and then you get maybe you see it on Jenkins, you build on Jenkins. So I was trying to get the difference. What was the difference between pool SCM and webhook?
Right. So just to answer that question for now, I think I did say that we are not going to talk about webhook because that is a little more advanced than Pole SCM. But if you wanted to set up a webhook, you can go to your repo, you can go to settings, and you will see an option here that's called webhook. Now, this is where you will need to set up a few things. So if you really want to do it, now again, you need to understand what is a post request, what is a get request in HTTP, and how to work with APIs, which is
Mhm.
why I didn't really talk about webhook as such,
Yeah,
because
because
Pole SCM,
if you look at the pool SCM, it looks like you almost do the, because I know when you don't do any change, it won't trigger, right?
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
see, webhooks is exactly going to do the same thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
just that the difference between Pole SCM and webhooks is that Pole SCM would check your repo every 2 minutes, but in case of webhooks, it would
Mm-hmm.
not check it every 2 minutes. It would automatically receive, like how you receive a Gmail notification in your phone, right? It
Yeah.
does not check every moment. It's called a push notification. That's
Uh,
what you mean by a webhook. So it
uh,
would automatically notify Jenkins, and Jenkins would not have to check every 2 minutes.
Oh,
That's the only difference.
uh,
But the end result would always be the same. Your
oh,
job would be triggered whenever there is a change inside the repo.
oh, that's it.
Right? Now, if you really want to set up webhooks, you can go to your repo, click on settings, go to webhooks, and click on this guide and read more about how you can set up webhooks. But that's not really something we're going to do in the training because there's no point in learning this when we have more important things to do.
Yeah, I've really I've done webbook before, but the problem was it looks like they are the same thing. That's what I was asking. I know how to set it,
Yeah,
I know how to do it, but I was just asking because they do. I was like, every time that you make the way you explain the pool SCM, I was thinking maybe they are the same. I know how to set everything and all. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's exactly same as pole SEM. There's just a little bit of technical difference is all.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So I'll mute you now. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Andreas. So with that, guys, we'll call it a day. I have a couple of questions. Somebody asked me about the database location for Jenkins. So hold on to that until tomorrow, Nadeem. I'll share it with you tomorrow. Somebody asked me where is the firewall settings for Google Cloud. This is where you find it. You go to Google Cloud, you go to, I think, VPC network, and you go to firewall rules. Once you go to firewall rules, you have to, there would be an option to create a firewall rule. So create a firewall rule and make sure that port 8080 is allowed and the range would be 0.0.0.0/0, which would mean everyone. So that's what you want to do. So try it. If you're not able to do it, I'll probably help you tomorrow. Cool. We already passed almost 20 minutes, guys. So I guess at this point, we'll call it a day. I really hope you try the basics, like the basic things with Jenkins to get used to the UI, because tomorrow we'll be starting directly with the pipeline and how do you create a pipeline and all of that. Cool. So I wish you all a good night or a good day, and I'll see you all tomorrow. You all have a wonderful time. Bye bye.